Handstands are a really beautiful skill, a beautiful bodyweight skill that a lot of people want to get to, but it's pretty easy to make mistakes in your journey to training for a handstand, especially as a beginner. So in this video, I'm going to break down for you the 5 biggest mistakes that I made personally as someone who taught herself how to do handstands in her 20s. I don't have gymnastics background. I don't have formal handstand training experience, was not a child prodigy or anything like that. So I taught myself how to do handstands. There's a lot of trial and error in the process, and I made a lot of mistakes. And so today I'm going to share with you the 5 biggest mistakes that I've seen in people trying to learn their handstands and also that I made myself, so that you can just skip all of those. Skip all of those mistakes in the beginning, you know? Make it efficient, because what happens when you make these mistakes is you either train with really bad form, which makes it harder for you to actually get to a better handstand, harder handstand progressions later down the line, or you put yourself at a higher risk for injury, which we don't want. Or you train inefficiently, which it takes a longer amount of time, and that can be really deterring in the process, especially if you're really excited and motivated when you start training, and if you're just not seeing results, then it might be just inefficient training. So in this video, I'm going to expose 5 really common beginner handstand mistakes and what you can do to not make those mistakes, like what you can do instead, so that we're getting to the handstand. Mistake number 1 is super obvious. This is what everyone does when they're like, oh, I'm excited, I'm gonna start getting after training the handstand. And what they do is they start kicking up into a handstand on the floor. And so you might think logically, okay, if I wanna train handstands, I should try and do a handstand. Of course, this is given that you're comfortable even going upside down in the first place. That's a whole nother can of worms, but assuming that you're comfortable going out upside down and falling out of your handstand and catching yourself correctly when you bail out, people will go into just kicking up into handstands on the floor. But you don't want to do this, because this is very intense on your shoulders. As someone who doesn't have the strength to hold a handstand yet, or the balance or the awareness of being upside down, this is not going to be the most efficient way in you actually getting to your handstand, because you aren't going to be able to hold yourself in a handstand upside down long enough for you to actually reap the benefits of going upside down into the handstand. So it's kind of like an inefficient form of training. Although maybe you have previously athletic experience and that make you strong enough to do that, it's not going to be the most efficient way in you developing the specific muscles that you need, specifically your anterior shoulders and your traps and other supportive muscles in getting your handstands. So it's kind of like, if I want to squat 200 pounds, say that's like a goal of mine, and I want to squat 200 pounds, I wouldn't just go try and squat 200 pounds to get my 200-pound squat. What I would do is I would start with a lighter weight, and over time I would add on weight, I would add on reps, I would add on sets. I would use progressive overload over time to make it harder, so that I develop the specific muscle I need to do the squat, so then I can get to my 200-pound squat. I wouldn't just go straight trying to do the 200-pound squat. And so handstands are similar. We want to actually work up to developing the muscle we need specifically that allows us to hold our handstand before just going straight into it. So the important thing is to use a progression that allows you to slowly develop your muscle, also get more comfortable being upside down, also practice proper body awareness and good form, because it's kind of like if you just go for a 200-pound squat, it's kind of like ego lifting. That's kind of what it is when you just try to kick up into a handstand upside down. Easy mistake, super common mistake. And yeah, it might feel like exciting and good and help you become more aware of being upside down. But if you really want to actually train and develop your muscles long enough, you actually are going to have to really back it down and use progressions that help you develop good form and the proper muscles you need to do the handstand. And so how do you do this? Well, you're going to get comfortable using a box first. I know, it's super non-glamorous to train handstands with a box. But what using a box lets you do is slowly develop your muscular endurance and strength you need to get into the handstand, and also improve body upside down awareness, so like how your body feels when you're upside down. Because as someone who, doesn't do a handstand, going right upside down is gonna probably be a little bit of a shock to you. Like, your head's probably gonna fill with blood. You're probably gonna be like, oh my God, this is weird, this is crazy, this is hard, like you're not used to it. And what happens over time when you use progressions, and just in handstand training in general, the longer that you get used to being upside down, using boxes, using walls, going onto the floor for your handstand eventually, is your central nervous system becomes more used to being inverted, in that inverted position where your hands are on the floor and your legs are above your head. And so as time goes on, it's not gonna feel like that crazy shock to your system when you kick up into a handstand. You're not gonna be like, oh my God, all the blood rushes to your head and you're like shaking and stuff. That goes away over time. This is part of the actual training process of working towards your handstand, using a box as a progression, moving to the wall as a progression, and then eventually getting to the floor. So starting to use a box. Grab a plyometric box, even grab a bench. If you're at home and don't have gym equipment, use a table. So you're gonna wanna place your knees onto the box, bench, table, elevated surface, and this is gonna help you get used to adding load onto your shoulders, your hands, being upside down, and over time, you're gonna wanna progress this, so move from the box to the wall. And you're gonna wanna put one leg against the wall and use it as a supportive leg, so you don't have to spend as much focus on your balance necessarily as actually being in the upside down position. So if you kind of think about kicking up into the floor handstand, you might hold the handstand for like half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds even maybe. But if you think about if you kick up into a floor handstand like 10 times in a session, that's like 2 seconds per 10 handstands. So like 20 total seconds upside down. Whereas if you use the wall and you rest one leg against it as support, so you don't have to focus as much on balancing, but you can really spend a lot of time under tension, basically with your muscles being challenged to develop that strength that you need to hold the handstand. So if you can hold against the wall for maybe 10 seconds and you do that for 5 rounds even, that's gonna be 500 seconds as of compared to 20, which is why it's really useful to develop strength using a box and a wall. Although it doesn't look as glamorous or as fancy or as funky, fun, fresh, it is gonna help you get to your handstand much faster. So keep that in mind. Common mistake number 2 that beginners in handstand training make is just doing a few handstands at the end of a session. Just kind of like throwing them in there and being like, yeah, I'm doing handstand training. I did a few rounds of handstands at the end of my upper body workout. But that's not gonna be enough time, unfortunately, to properly develop the muscular endurance and strength that you actually need to get to the handstand. Yes, this technique is gonna work totally fine if you're not really invested in getting to the handstand as fast as possible and you're like, yeah, if I get there in 5 years, I'm good. This is gonna be fine for you, totally fine for you in that case. But if you're really interested in getting to the handstand as fast as possible, if you're very serious about actually focusing on your training and like getting the handstand, then you're gonna wanna do 2 things. One, put your handstands at the beginning of the session or dedicate an entire session to handstands. Doesn't have to be every day of the week. In fact, I would not recommend it being every day of the week, especially if you're a beginner. But even twice or 3 times, do like a 20 to 30 minute handstand session. That's gonna be way better than just throwing in like a few rounds of handstands at the end of each workout. And the reason that I recommend devoting entire sessions to your handstand training is because a big component of actually working on getting your handstand is the mind-body connection you need to balance upside down. So yes, you might have the strength, but part of the handstand is strength and the other part is balance and what I call your mind-body connection. So your awareness of being upside down, of what your body position is while you're upside down, the placement of your wrists, the placement of your hips, the placement of your legs, what are my shoulders doing? So like all of these little things, it just takes time for you to become more aware and in tune with those aspects of your body while you're upside down. Because the first part of handstand training is just even getting used to being upside down. You know, like how to fall out of your handstand and then how to actually feel your body while you're upside down in your handstands. And when you only kick upside down a few times at the end of your handstand, you're just not giving your body enough time to really develop that mind-body connection. And kind of funny enough, contrary to what you would think if you are familiar with strength training. So like if you go into the gym and you lift weights, you might feel freshest at the beginning of your session rather than at the end because you're less pumped, your muscles are the freshest, you probably have the most energy at the beginning of your session. But interestingly enough, when you're training handstands, you actually get better at handstands generally towards the end of the session. And that's because it takes time for your central nervous system to acclimate or become more used to being upside down. It takes a hot second for your body basically to be like, we're upside down now and I'm really pressing through my hands. And it takes time for the central nervous system to develop that awareness of being upside down. And that's why we devote entire sessions to handstand training or even start your session. So maybe you have a limited amount of time to train per week. Well, I would recommend starting with handstand training and then finishing with whatever strength or complementary training that you are adding into your workout. Because it does take a hot second for your body to get used to being upside down. Time under tension and body awareness, they all take time to develop. Kind of like in life. It's the power of focus and energy. The places that you put your focus, that you put your energy on a daily basis is where you're gonna actually see results. So same thing with handstand training, same thing with whatever fitness goal that you're working towards. The more intention you have in your training for that goal, and the more time and energy that you devote towards that goal, the more you're really gonna see the results of your training in that area of fitness, or even in life. We're making this philosophical now. Okay, mistake number 3. This one is so common, and that is not properly warming up for your handstand training. And believe me, I did this so much as a beginner, guys. So much. Like, I was like, all right, do some arm circles, do some wrist circles. We're good to go. Let's go straight to hopping up, kicking up into our handstand. And what that looked like is I spent the rest of the session basically just falling out of my handstand. Couldn't hold it, had no muscle activation, didn't give my body enough time to adapt to being upside down, and I also put myself at a higher risk of being injured. I was not doing proper shoulder warm-ups. I was barely doing any wrist warm-ups. Of course, we're good today, but what I would recommend, because it took me a hot second to realize, is the more time you spend warming up, getting your muscles warm, activating your shoulder muscles, wrist muscles, and I do core activation as well, but the more time that you spend doing that and getting your body used to going upside down, so part of the warm-up is also beginner handstand progressions. And of course, this is gonna depend on what stage of beginner you are. So if you're a beginner who just started using the box and you've just gotten comfortable falling and bailing out of your handstand, then maybe it's less of the actual handstand progression and slightly more of the full body warm-up. The wrist, the shoulder, your core, getting your body nice and prepared for being in the handstand position. If you're a slightly more progressed beginner and you're using the wall to train, then this is going to look like maybe some more box progressions as you get your body used to going upside down. And I'm going to make an entire video about how to warm up for your handstand soon. So if you want to stay tuned for that, hit subscribe. That'll be coming out soon. But 2 main reasons we really want to do warm up. 1, injury prevention. Need I say more? I don't think so. 2 is kind of like I talked about before, where you're acclimating your central nervous system to being upside down, being in that handstand position. We're going to want to actually activate and really warm up and prepare our upper body muscles that we use for the handstand before we get into handstand training. So this means warming up the shoulders, doing flexors and extensors in your forearms. You know, we use those a lot. Those are basically the muscles around our wrist joint. So thinking about rotator cuff and shoulders, thinking about even your core. So I'll like throw in hollow body holds. I love hollow body holds to get your body into the shape it needs in order to be in the handstand. So just doing some warm-ups, getting those muscles activated properly before going into the handstand. And honestly, the minimum time that I would recommend warming up for your handstand is like 5 minutes. That's like the minimum, bare minimum. And of course, mine's a bit longer now because my actual handstand training is more advanced, more intense. As a beginner, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a 10-minute warm-up, but I haven't seen any negative effects of warming up for longer. So I would only recommend it, honestly. And different hand balancers have different warm-up routines that work for them. I've seen a ton of different strategies. So I'd really encourage that you do some trial and error and figure out what works best for you and your body, and what makes you feel the most warmed up and get into the correct handstand position best for you. But a few things that I personally do is definitely would recommend wrist exercise warm-ups. Get your flexors and extensors warmed up, a lot of shoulder movements, so kind of like shoulder warm up. I'll make an entire video because I'm not even gonna get into all the exercises right now. I would wanna like sit down and show them to you. And then also actual core engagement and posture, as well as like a little bit of stretching. And that's what I do personally, but obviously play around and see what works best for you. And then I also get into some early handstand progressions, but again, play around and see what works best for you. The minimum I'll warm up is like 10+ minutes. It's a long warm-up, and that's part of the joy of handstands. It takes time. All right, mistake number 4, and this is probably slightly for more advanced beginners, but this is probably the most painful mistake that I made in my entire handstand training journey. And that is when I kick up into wall holds, aka when you are using a wall and you just kick up into a handstand, you do not want your face to be facing away from the wall. You want your nose to be like touching the wall, or at least your head facing towards the wall. And oh my gosh, I did this for so long, so long. The way that I learned to do the handstand is not the most optimal. I started working towards my handstand, I guess you could say, by kicking up against my wall in my dorm room at college. I would just kick up against the wall, my head facing, do like a little wall endurance hold for a hot second as I was studying, little, you know, like flip it upside down, get some blood to the brain after you're like sitting studying science for so long. And so that's kind of like the start of my handstand training. But for a long time, I would do this and I would always face with my head away from the wall. So it was never like nose to wall. And what this did is, yes, it allowed me to develop shoulder endurance, but it taught me really, really bad form. It also didn't improve my balance at all. So when I would kick up into a handstand, yeah, I eventually got the handstand because I developed the shoulder endurance for it, but I had really horrible form. My back would arch a lot, giving me what hand balancers called banana back. I would flop around. I had no control over my entry into the handstand, so I would like kick up into a handstand, but then I would like move my hands around. I couldn't control my legs. I was like upside down, but it wasn't good form and it didn't look that pretty. And so after a long time, I had to really backtrack and retrain myself how to get correct form. You can imagine this is a little bit of an ego hit. Going from being on the floor and being able to hold a few seconds to going back to the wall, fixing my form, of course now facing the wall, doing different drills, going to the box, and working there for a long, long time, like months and months, before I was able to really fix and even slightly improve my handstand form, which is when I was able to actually kick up into a handstand and hold it for more than 10 seconds. And kick up into a handstand and not like flop around and move my hands as much. It's when I actually developed the control. So what do you do instead of facing away from the wall? Well, you're just gonna wanna face your nose towards the wall. And why do you wanna do this? Because it lets you develop the correct form by stacking your hips over your shoulders, over your wrists, which of course is what you do in handstand. You think about a proper line handstand, you think generally it's a pretty straight line. It's not like feet are out, poor shoulder mobility. So basically what creates that really beautiful line is being able to really properly stack all of your joints on top of each other. And when you practice the handstand hold with the wall, facing the wall, what you're able to do is rest one leg on the wall and you can really practice that proper alignment of stacking hips, shoulders over wrists, which is eventually what you're gonna need in order to get into the floor handstand. And yes, this is much scarier because you have to be more comfortable bailing out of the handstand in order to go nose to wall in your endurance handstand hold. So what I would really recommend if this is a very scary thing for you is one, get super comfortable bailing out of your handstand. This could involve some progressions like donkey kicks. I'll make a video on how to bail out of your handstand, but just become more comfortable falling out of being upside down on the floor. This also might mean doing more box progressions, being more comfortable being upside down in general, and pressing your hands into the floor. And then when you progress from there, it might look like doing wall walks. So having your feet on the wall, being like in a plank position with your hands on the floor, and slowly walking your feet up the wall, of course with your nose to the wall, until your feet are quite far up the wall. Then walking back down the wall. Or even walking up the wall and then practicing falling off the wall. So it's really just gonna come down to being more comfortable bailing out of the handstand, falling away from the wall. And if you're not at the wall endurance handstand hold yet as progression, it's okay. You can still use this as a tip in your own training if you're using the box, where you're gonna wanna think about stacking your hips over your shoulders, over your wrists. Wow, I've said that so many times in this video, but the alignment is so key. And just prop your iPhone up or prop your phone up in the corner, take a little video of you from that side angle, and then once you finish your progression, whether on the box or the wall or even on the floor, you can go back, watch the video of your handstand and see how well you did at stacking your hips, and then use that as feedback for your next round of handstands. Be like, oh yes, okay, this is good. I was really well stacked. Or maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was a straight line, but actually I need my legs to go more into the vertical position. They're really piking. And then in that case, you might be like, okay, I need to engage my hamstrings more next round. And so next round you go and do the same progression with the box, wall, floor, record it again, go back. See how you did. Maybe you overflexed and that caused you to fall out of your handstand. Or maybe now you did a nice straight line and you're like, okay, I gotta remember that feeling of engaging my hamstrings. Take a video of your handstand. It's really helpful. Would recommend. And mistake number 5, which is somewhat controversial, is not incorporating other full body exercises to complement your handstand training. And the reason I say this is controversial is because within the hand balancing space, I've come across 2 main philosophies towards training and getting to your handstand. Philosophy 1 is just train more handstands and eventually you'll get your handstand. And this comes along with the idea of like, the more of something that you do, the better you'll be able to get at it, because you're going to become more aware of your body upside down, you're going to develop the strength, and just doing more of something is better. The cons to this philosophy, of course, is you're prone to overtraining. You're more likely to injure yourself, and if you're doing absolutely no strength training on the side of that, you're more likely to be at muscle imbalances. If you're not doing any like pull skills, you're not doing mobility, you're gonna have no leg strength. So doing more is gonna, of course, help your body get used to being upside down, acclimate your central nervous system, improve your body positioning, your coordination, your awareness of being upside down, and actually your balance, as well as your shoulder strength, specific for handstands. But especially as a beginner, you're gonna be more prone to overtraining if you're not careful with it. Kind of philosophy number 2 is you're gonna wanna do handstand training and then complement that with full body strength training. And this is the idea that your strength training on the side is gonna actually help you progress in your handstand faster than if you were to just do handstands alone by yourself. And I've seen this philosophy used more by calisthenics, bodyweight training athletes who are just interested in getting to their handstand as like an additional calisthenics skill. Like you think they're already training for like the muscle up or the pull up or the front lever or some calisthenics skill, and they're like, oh, let's get a handstand too, which totally valid. That's actually how I started kind of training handstands and getting into like more hand balancing, is because I started training calisthenics. Whole different story. And I was like, oh, I would love to be able to just kick up into a handstand. Like I can kind of kick up and flop around and it's not pretty. And I was like, I'd love to get good at the handstand. And so I kind of came from that realm of thought. And of course, the pros of training handstands as well as training your full body strength is you're gonna develop the muscular endurance and you're gonna actually develop full body strength that's gonna help you get to your handstand faster. Also less likely to develop muscle imbalances and overtraining, of course. So if I'm doing like all handstands every day of the week, I'm definitely gonna be more likely to injure my shoulder, overstrain my wrists than if I do handstands a few times a week and then focus on strengthening the rest of my muscles through other modalities like calisthenics or bodyweight training or even weights in the gym. Now, of course, cons to this is spending slightly less time doing handstands. You aren't going to be able to work on the body positioning, the coordination, body awareness, that type of thing when you're doing strength training. So it's kind of like a pros cons, but since I got into hand balancing from this area of thought where I did full body strength training complementing my handstand training, I can only speak to that. I am biased. But I did see really good results doing both, and I can see how it would be an issue if you only do handstands. So main pros to adding in full body conditioning: you're more likely to improve your handstands faster by adding strength. You're less at risk for overtraining. By training your full body, you're also less likely to have muscle imbalances, so you can improve your leg mobility, which is gonna down the line help you with kind of like body awareness and more advanced handstanding skills. Also developing strength in your like back and biceps through exercises like the pull-up, or in your chest with exercises like the push-up. These are gonna help you develop like a full body strength and not just the strength you need to hold in a hand balance. So there's a lot of different pros to that, but it's gonna help you in your handstand as well. And this also does make your training more fun if you're coming from a background of like weights or calisthenics, where you already are working out in the gym or doing some sort of workout, or even like running or whatever sport you like to do. You can add in handstand training on the side because it doesn't have to be your entire routine. It can be an addition to your routine, or like added on the side of your running or the yoga practice that you do or the calisthenics training that you do. Like it can be an addition. So for full body strengthening, this doesn't need to look like a workout every single day a week. You can get a lot of benefits from just 2 workouts a week, 30 minutes to an hour. It doesn't have to be like 2-hour workouts, anything like that. If you're trying to be super time efficient in the gym, I'd recommend sticking to compound exercises. This can be any body weight or weight exercises, thinking about your pull-up, your push-up, your squat, your hip thrust, your dip. Compound exercises that recruit and use a bunch of different muscles, because then by just doing one exercise, you're gonna be working more of your body than if I were to just do like bicep curls or something. Also, if you're trying to be super time efficient, you can fit them into supersets. So in this case, you would wanna take 2 different exercises that work slightly different muscles, or just like completely different muscles. And then you're gonna wanna do those 2 exercises back to back with no rest, and then rest in between, and then repeat, and that's called a superset. So for example, you could do chin-ups, and then no rest, go straight into dips. And then you would rest 2 minutes, 1 minute, however long, and then you would repeat that superset, and that's gonna make your training way more time efficient. So that is an option. Alternatively, you know, an example for like upper body, lower body, you could do chin-ups, no rest, go straight into squats or hip thrust. So yeah, it's gonna be a little tiring, but that's the point of the workout. And also, if you're trying to be time efficient, this is a great way to get it in fast and sweet, and then you can just throw it at the end of your handstand training or on a day that you're not doing handstand training. Works good. And I know I've made a ton of videos on my channel about like calisthenics and also weight training, but the main thing to remember here, working between, depending on of course your level, but anywhere between 6 to 14 reps, and the most important thing being that you're really challenging your muscles, so it shouldn't be like easy, like repping out the pull-ups or whatever. If repping out the pull-ups is too easy, add on weight. You should be on weighted pull-ups, that type of thing. And if repping out pull-ups is way too hard, you can't even comprehend repping out 6 pull-ups, that's okay too. Use a progression like bar-assisted pull-ups, use a resistance band, do lat pull-downs, but do some sort of exercise that makes it easier so that you're really struggling, but you can still push through, because challenge is what's gonna help you grow. It's gonna challenge your muscles. You gotta shock the muscle. You know what I mean? And I made a little bonus mistake. So mistake number 6 bonus is thinking it's gonna happen in a week. You're not gonna get your handstand in a week unless you have some sort of like athletic genetic predisposition to being really good at handstands. It's possible that you're coming from like a calisthenics background, doing advanced skills. That full body strength is gonna make it easier for you to get to your handstand faster. But even if you have the strength to hold your handstand, there's so many other things like shoulder mobility, body positioning, body awareness being upside down, and the balance. So maybe you can hold it, but it's probably not gonna look that beautiful. Sorry. It is a journey. Handstand training is a journey, so just find a way to really enjoy it, make it fun, keep it funky, fun, fresh, so that you're actually enjoying your training, because that's what's gonna keep you training long term, as opposed to just like, I tried training handstands for like 2 weeks, and then I decided I hate it because it's really hard, and I don't see any results. So find a way to make it fun. Maybe do it with friends, maybe join a class. Keep it fun. It's not gonna happen real fast. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you don't fall prey to any of these handstand mistakes that I made. Hopefully you were able to learn from my handstand mistakes and not make them yourself. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I will see you in the next one. Bye.